Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Built to Hold. I'm your host, Sylvain Perrier. Wait a minute. This is not an episode of Built to Hold. I am here with Joe Albi, who's actually the host, and I'm the guest today. So I'm going to throw it over to him.
Yes, usually I'm behind the camera, the producer. I would say Built to Hold just a little bit, helping out with Sylvain's podcast. For this special episode, the reason we wanted to do it was because we wanted to get to know the founder behind the show. We'd love to introduce our group leaders at Vertus, and with Sylvain's platform and the podcast, we thought what better way to do it than on the show. So, if you're ready, Sylvain, let's get into the questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
For sure.
I'm ready.
So I think by now a lot of people on the show understand the brief history of where you've been before Vertus with Mercatus and your 15 years there, roughly, from founding
21.
the company. 21. Oh,
20,
yeah.
21.
21. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So with that, before Mercatus, before you really got to dig into being a founder with your own business, what shaped how you think about operating, being a person in business, being an operator of a business?
Yeah. So what changed for me before Mercatus in terms of operating a business? Early on in my career, I graduated my second degree, computer science, 1996, and I started working for a small company in Ottawa. And the business was really fundamentally specialized in employee and customer measurement, working for large Canadian banks, also retailers, sports teams. And my CEO at the time, Peter Andrews, was just a fantastic mentor. And I really grew up in that business. And I was part of a team that did a reverse takeover on the TSX Venture Exchange. And my CEO told me one day, he said, "Hey, I know you like technology. You think it's great." It's 1996. This is before really the World Wide Web became more widespread in our day-to-day lives. And I think we know how that story goes today. But he opened the door for me to go learn every other piece of the business. So I spent time with the shipping team. I spent time with sales. I spent time with marketing. I spent time running a help desk. I spent time answering the phones at lunchtime when the receptionist wanted to go have her lunch break. And the appreciation that gave me was to understand that all businesses are built out of two things: simple, easy to understand, repeatable processes that evolve with time as businesses change or face challenges. And the second ingredient, if not the most important ingredient, people. And that number one, number two can't live without the other one. And so as I grew up and started Mercatus and grew up through Mercatus, as we grew from $100,000 revenue to multi-million dollars in revenue, it really fundamentally just enabled me to keep an open mind that things will change, and that's okay.
Awesome. And you sort of mentioned that you got involved in the different functions. Was that because of an innate interest you had in those other functions, or was it really coming from your mentor, the CEO of the business, beforehand?
Yeah, that was part of it. I think a lot of it is when I was a kid, my parents, my sister still reminds me of this today. They wouldn't buy me toys eventually because I would just break them with the hammer. Why? Because I wanted to know how is this made? What makes this? And it sounds like, yeah, Christmas great. The day after Christmas, not so great. But it was more, I've always been curious how things work. And I got a good dose of that as a teenager. I actually, most people wouldn't know this. I spent 5 years working in a pulp mill and various jobs and very dangerous jobs, right? On a logging deck and a chipper, unloading chemical from train cars, just weird stuff. But I got a good taste of it again. I got to work in every single department for the most part, and over five very long summers in a pulp mill to understand what makes a business tick. And so that curiosity as a kid taking stuff apart. I, I could tell stories of the stuff I'd taken apart. My father just shocked to just, you know, 1996, starting my career in tech, and it's just learning that again, those two ingredients are fundamental.
Okay, so pulp mill. I didn't know this beforehand, but I have to dig into
Hmm.
this because it's a very
Sure.
different industry
Yeah.
than, getting into tech
Yeah.
in that side.
Mhm.
How'd you make that change into tech? Was it, again, sort of just an interest you had? Was there anything else behind that? Especially coming from a very industrial, I guess, background, I would say, in the pulp mill.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, it was, my first degree was in business, and I want to be a CPA. Part of it is I really like that movie, The Secret of My Success, Michael J. Fox, right? Small town kid. He goes to a big city, he's in the mailroom, but he wants to be in mergers and acquisitions, and he has this idea of, reformatting the business and all those things. And that movie was a bit of an anchor moment for me when I was in business. And in the mid 90s of fashion, because I grew up in the outskirts of Ottawa, the home of Nortel, Corel, all the big tech companies, um, it was interesting. And I left home at a very young age to pursue post-secondary education. And so you're exposed in the nation capital of everyone talking about these things. And so you go from a world living in a very small town, the anchor business being this pulp mill, and then the forestry industry around it. So industrialization, mechanization, to blue collar jobs that are fundamentally important for the well-being of our economy, to now kind of focusing on saying, well, do I want a career in business, or do I want to finish that degree then focus over to computer science? Computer science for me gave me that the two things that I really wanted. One is, a bit of a way to satiate my appetite, my curiosity. And the second one is the ability to create something out of your own mind. So when I came back every summer to work, I was fortunate that a lot of the gentlemen that I work with, and it was predominantly a male environment, was they were like, "Hey, we understand you can work with computers. Hey, we have a project. We Could you tackle this like when you're not doing your general labor stuff?" So I got the best of both worlds in that sense, but I didn't see it as a cutoff. It's like or black and white. It was more of the same journey, just in a different environment.
Oh, that's awesome to hear. I didn't know that background, so it was great to get the insight on that. To get back on track with some of the questions we had here. So, fast forward, you found Mercatus. As Mercatus grew and really began to take off, when did your job as the founder begin to change from, I'd say something probably more along the lines of a startup to really begin honing in on the processes behind the business and optimizing them?
Yeah, I was fortunate. So when I moved from Ottawa to Toronto, my mentor was a gentleman by the name of G. Raymond Chang. And Ray's family really took me underneath their wing. Ray was at the time was the chairman of CI Investments, which was I would say the probably still the most at I think it was at the time probably 100 billion of assets under management, largest mutual fund company, not owned by one of the big banks here in Canada. And CI recently sold to a foreign entity. So he had transitioned from being CEO over to chairman. Bill Holland had stepped into the role of CEO, and Ray had this idea of starting up this company, Mercatus, and its first embodiment. And he brought me on board, moved me to Toronto. I was brought on board as VP of technology. So I was a co-founder with him, but I didn't step into the shoes of CEO right away. Ray assumed the role of CEO, and at one point Ray's like, "Hey, like you really like operations. Do you want to do more of that?" And so I was promoted. I remember it was a Saturday. I was at the office working, and he walks in. "I'm going to make you chief operating officer." And I was okay, great. It's what I like to do. I had to earn my stripes to be CEO. I really, it wasn't given to me, and nor should it have been. And it was very much a strong focus in understanding what it takes to run a business financially, operationally, and 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 that when that promotion occurred, it was when I was offered the role of CEO. It was a 2-year journey to get to that. So we were, I think at the time, we were still sub 5 million in revenue, but we had 10, 15 employees. And so I had to, and when I didn't grind it out, always loved what I love everything that I do because I had purpose in doing it. But it wasn't given to me. It was a lot of hard work.
Then I guess definitely in between those two times, those 2 years, it'd be really interesting to hear about what the key experiences were that defined your time there. But then also, I'd love to hear it afterwards once you got given the CEO seat, and also what the differences were between those experiences.
Yeah. So I was still, I don't think I was 40 yet. So I wasn't 40 yet. And the first thing that paid dividends for me in those 2 years, one of our board members stepped in as a executive coach. And so I spent about 3 days a week on average with him, George, and he would shadow me. And so we would brief in the morning, we would debrief at night. And he was also very transparent. And so that's where I really honed my skills on how to work with people, how on the financial side, he was a CFO and quite successful CFO. So that gave me a completely different appreciation to how to run a business by the numbers. But even more importantly, I was able to relate to him from a technology perspective. So he covered my blind spots, and I learned from that. And the 2 years were great. Coming out of the 2 years and becoming a CEO, and the board of directors made the decision to officially uh, make me the CEO. Um, I wouldn't say anything material changed in the business, but what became apparent is how more you have to pay attention to the key drivers of any organization. So, staff allocation, product roadmap, so technology, product road mapping, making sure your customers are well treated and taken care of. So you can never lose sight of those key things in a business because because anything will draw your attention away when you're a CEO. And it also depends how you've grown up. I grew up through the technology track, so it's easy for me to get romanced in look here and not pay attention to the other key things of the business. So I learned that it's a multidisciplinary process of being a CEO, and no single thing can draw your attention away. The other big lesson, and I think I've written about this quite often, um, it's two things I've learned. It's what I call the AB phenomena, so the in team and the out team. And I think I recently published something on this, and I had to, I actually had to last summer. Uh, an executive from an unrelated organization, pre Constellation, reached out and say, "Hey, I'm having a hard time relating to some of my employees," and so the in and out or the AB team is a CEO sometimes will gravitate to a group of people within the organization, and they become this trusted cabal where they'll go out to lunch, they'll accidentally alienate other key members of the senior leadership team. This staff they see that, and it can create this strong division where you're making a decision not at the water cooler, but at the pub on a Thursday night or at breakfast on a Monday morning with those members of the team. So you have to be very mindful of those things. So, and that was also part when you step off an elevator in the morning and you open that front door and you're the first to turn on the light, you're on stage. The second one, the second one was even, I'd say, as much as an important lesson than the first one. And I don't think I've written as much about this, is you got to treat everyone fairly and on the same footing always. And that second lesson for me has always been tied to my roots. It doesn't matter where a person's come from or how they grew up. They deserve your respect. You, they will see things differently in a business, very differently in a business, that you as a CEO may not see with a blind spot. So talking to those individuals, getting their perspective is critical. And I've parlayed that into a third lesson, which I'm happy to share. It's the risk ratio. It's a risk ratio that I call. A risk ratio is something very simple to understand. When a crisis happens in a business, not everything is a crisis. So you have to determine, do I need to make a decision today or can I sleep on it? So a great example is you get a phone call from a customer. There's been a cybersecurity incident. There's been a breach. And if it's happening right away, you got to deal with it right away. Pretty simple. In some cases, you'll also have other things that will materialize that it's okay. Take a day. Think about it. I always found out that if you follow that general rule, you're fresher in the morning. You can come back with a clear head, make a decision, explain why you made that decision. But those three things, those are like stuff that you just keep in the toolbox.
I want to go to that key components piece first. There's a lot of great pieces in there in that response, but with the key components, is that something you were able to pick up quickly? How was that process of learning about the different key components that you should be focusing on, segmenting your time properly so you're not getting distracted with the latest and greatest or this or that?
A lot of mistakes, a lot of disappointed people. And also, I would say also uh, a lot of humble pie. And I think I had a chairman who was a former pro ball player. He was a pitcher out of his. He never went pro, so he was in Worcester. I hope I pronounced that right for the people in Ohio. But he was an all-star pitcher, and he was eventually a partner at PwC. His name was Bernie Nisker. And so Bernie used to say to me, so you live long enough, you're going to go through things twice, maybe three, maybe four times. And he was not wrong. I find now that on the second incident, third incident, you're like, yeah, the first three times I did it this way, it didn't work. Here's the better way of doing this. And it's also I have a pretty deliberate way that I prepare for the week. So I on Sundays I do take that time to ramp up the week, understanding what are going to be my three things I want to accomplish for the week. And then every morning I have the big three for the day. And then my day's laid out for me generally in advance. And there's always a buffer. I tend to believe that when you're in our world here at Vertus, and we have 35 plus businesses in our group, and I have five in my portfolios, you have to be ready and ebb and flow with the CEOs in case they need your help. And so by being prepared, I understand what my non-negotiables are for the day to make sure they're closed, because people depend on me. People depend on me from a leadership perspective, but also depend on me, our marketing team, and so on and so on. That I can easily absorb the hits of the surprises that need to occur.
Awesome. One other piece I want to touch on, I read the article you mentioned, the piece about the inner circle with CEOs. I was listening to the CEO and founder of Snap talk about something different, but in a very similar lens. His was more so relating to ensuring that every problem in the business is surfaced as often as possible so that you can actually focus on it and solve it. I feel like it very heavily relates to what you wrote in that piece and what you mentioned. How, I guess, how difficult does that become in terms of recognizing that there's a problem there and then being able to make that separation and move past that inner circle and make a space where every employee, every team member is able to get their voice heard at the table and, surface some of these problems and some of the opportunities that they see as well.
It's not easy. It's not easy because ego gets in the way. And it's not necessarily CEOs with egos. It's everyone with an ego. We are we are but human, and that's is our single biggest flaw. Is and that's okay, and it's accepting that. But good cultures where you can have honesty, respect, and integrity collectively across everyone, where it's okay to sit down and openly debate and discuss this is a challenge, this is an issue. How do we make this a priority to solve? So a lot of corporations today will prescribe to, okay, let's do the weekly town hall or the biweekly all hands meeting. Let's do the strategy calibration in at the end of the year to be prepared for the new year. Let's review or and they do OKRs or they do MBOs, whatever the acronym of the month is. But what they won't do is bring everyone to the table and let the voices of the people percolate. And I'll give you today, now that I don't want to say seasoned, but I'm much older than I used to be. I remember when I worked in the pulp mill, and I used to work down at the far end of the pulp mill where the bales of paper would be cut. It's highly dangerous. There's this knife cutting paper and creating these 1-ton blocks of paper that are get wrapped and they go into a train car. I remember sitting there and there's a guy and he was a neighbor. He was a neighbor. He actually lived 2 houses down. He was an electrician. He was a very bright man from Nova Scotia. He says, I think you should get your work gloves ready. I'm like, what are you talking about? And so instinctively my shield comes up. What does this guy know? Like, right. So there's the ego of youth. And he said, the RPM of the machine's changing. I can hear it changing. And I'm like, I hear nothing. You know what? Within seconds, machine collapsed and shut down. He was 100% right. And I always go back to that example that the people in the day to day, the ones with experience that are still hungry and challenging the status quo, you got to go find them in your businesses. You got to go talk to them. They'll tell you everything you need to know. Because Joe, it's like when I ran Mercatus, when we had a receptionist pre-pandemic, we do batteries of interviews, candidates. I'd go out. All right, here's my top 3. What do you think, Tracy? Yeah, Tracy knew. She instinctively knew because she chat them up. They weren't they weren't on stage, they weren't interviewing. So when you're trying to solve problems in a business, you got to bring the right people at the table and you got to park your ego and you got to listen.
On that discussion of culture, bringing the team members together, you've been at Vertus now since I'd say October, September of 2025.
October 14th after Canadian Thanksgiving.
Awesome. So yeah, just over 6 months, right, with the team. How have you noticed those pieces of the culture that are often discussed across Constellation within Jonas and especially within Vertus? Have you seen those pieces play, and have there been any similarities to what we just described with,
Yeah,
bringing the team together?
yeah, it's quite delightful here at Vertus because what you get is, and I think it's like a collection of microcosms, right? It's like if you could draw a graphic of this, it'd be like intertwined. It'd be very strange in 3D and just ebbs and flows, but it's like a really well-oiled sports team. There's no egos. everyone's is super passionate about business, what's happening in industry, whether it's M&A, technology, uh, geopolitics. And I think that all forms into how we approach things. Uh, right out of the gate, people are, I mean, people don't walk around with sleeves here because they're so far rolled up to help. It's refreshing. You can go ask somebody, "Hey, I'm trying to accomplish this. How do you see this playing out?" And that was for me day one. Day one, like I came in, sat, found my desk, accidentally took someone's desk. Shout out to Grace because I took her desk. Um, so and then I took her desk, and so then shout out to her, and then so I Jim, our group CEO, came over and he's like, "Okay, here's access to a directory. Here's a bunch of files. Let's go. Let's start." And he's go, 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 go. And it was like drinking. I'll be honest. It's like drinking from a fire hose. And I came out of a role as global chief operating officer when I sold Mercatus. So it's like I went from like, let's crank it from 100 to 150. Let's go. And it's been great. And so the culture here is great. So when I go down to my business units, I try to take that level of curiosity I've built over the years and work with my CEOs and their teams, their leadership teams to say, okay, guys, help me understand how do you work and what success looks like. Maybe let's look at it differently. So it's trying to carry that down into each of the business units. I think is important.
Now, sort of related, I guess, more directly to your role and the other side of it from helping the business units and guiding the bulls. Uh, how does having built and operated a company from the ground up change how you approach acquisition? Obviously, because that's a big piece of what we do here, right, at Vertus.
Yeah. Um, when we sold Mercatus, it was entirely different. We hired a skilled banker out in New York City, reputable. I don't think we would have necessarily have changed it. We ran through a pretty elaborate process that was lengthy because because what we did in the market we're in. So that sphere of who could have acquired Mercatus at the time wasn't necessarily very large. Um, but we were VMS in the sense that we specialize in e-commerce for grocery retail. We could have tackled other verticals in retail, but that wasn't the case. But a highly contested space, nonetheless. So so when I go back and I focus on what my emotional journey was at the time. So, you're the CEO and you're on the board and you make a global decision. It's time to sell because we want to grow. We want to go to that next phase, and we want to bring additional expertise to the table. So when we approach the M&A process, and I'm on the phone with our business development team, or I'm on the phone with the senior members of the M&A team, and I'm having early stage or late stage conversations. I know emotionally where they are, and that they're likely feeling some sense of trepidation, some potentially some ambiguity, or no, the feeling of that you may be you're older, you may not have a home, you're losing your sense of purpose. So what I try to do is understand where they are emotionally in making their decision. And when they've made their decision, they're comfortable with them. And a lot of our business unit leaders stay on board for a period of time after they've sold the business, and we want them to. If they're in my group, I like to guide them through the art of the possible, but with very clearly defined guardrails. In our business, the beauty about being part of the Constellation family, our process has been tried and true since 95. We have more data. We have more data than I think most tier one VCs in 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 the world. It was 1,800 companies I think we own at some point. I don't even know what the real numbers are. It's not because they're not real. It's just there's so many. So you can pick up the phone and call someone that's been here quite some times, like Barry, right? Jonas's CEO, and Barry's a wealth of knowledge. You can say, "Hey Barry, I'm trying to approach this. Have you ever gone through this?" He goes, "Yeah, back in 2006, we bought this company. We went through this issue. I think you should approach it this way. And here's what's going to happen." Da 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 da. So we try to bring that knowledge to the companies that we buy, so they know that there's a home, has guardrails, and make them feel comfortable with the decision that they make.
And you've definitely touched on it just now with what you were saying about Constellation and what makes us so unique. I was just wondering, is there any other pieces that you've noticed in your 6 months, aside from the culture, aside from our wealth of knowledge and data from being a company since 95, right? Is there anything else that you've really noticed that's been such a key driver for acquisitions and the businesses that eventually come under our umbrella?
Yeah. So there's a strong culture of learning in that's permeated across the organization. It doesn't matter who you talk to or what department you're in. So so that's one thing. Two is I find, and I think most people would say the same thing. There's a welcoming sense if you go meet someone that's entirely in a different world from yours. So I'll give it a great example was a suggestion. Jonas Club technology team was having a 3-day learning session in one of our large educational. I call it an educational boardroom, but it's a room that's set up like a classroom. And someone said, "Hey, why don't you go introduce yourself?" And like I went in, and luckily some of them recognized me from the podcast. And we started talking. We just immediately clicked. "Hey, have you tried this? Hey, have you ever run into this issue? This is how I would approach it." So, so the thirst and appetite to learn is in the business, but even more importantly, what's part of it is we always challenge status quo here. We're not stagnant here. It's not set it and forget it. This isn't the George Foreman grill factory here. Like that's not who we are. So we're always looking not only at our businesses and the people that run them and their teams and what's happening in the market. It goes on, and this goes through this machine here, and we're like, okay, let's take a look at this critically. How could we take something from this and be better at it? Um, the third one, Joe, I think it's like I think we all make mistakes, um, and we learn from them, and I think that's refreshing, and it takes a really special culture to allow that to happen.
And agree more with everything there. Been here, been at Vertus for about the same time as you now. I joined in October as well, and I couldn't agree more. And that goes beyond Vertus with Jonas and the broader Constellation team. So Sylvain, those were the main questions I had for you.
Awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely go ahead. You do the best job at it. I'd love for you to give another plug for the podcast, Built to Hold, and the conversations we're having there.
Yeah, absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, if you liked what you heard today, and I'm sure you'll be hearing a lot of it, Joe's going to cut this up and use it across all of our social media channels. Do us a big favor, smash the like button, give us a follow, and don't forget to tune in to, I think at some point, Joe, we're going to be releasing the next episode. We got 8 or 9 of them in the can. We're almost done season 1 here, so we'll make sure to keep pushing out great content. Folks, appreciate you guys. Peace out.